Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources, articles, and research and distill them into the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight. Think of us as your shortcut to being truly well-informed, with surprising facts and just enough humor to keep you hooked.
Or maybe not so much humor today.
Yeah, maybe not today. Today, we're embarking on a mission to understand a profoundly disturbing and, well, critical aspect of modern history. The persistent, often concealed history of unethical human medical experimentation.
It's definitely a heavy topic, and it's a mission that takes us from, the post-WWII Nuremberg trials, which were meant to establish these crucial ethical boundaries.
Right, the line in the sand.
Exactly. And then through decades of violations, both here in the U.S. and internationally, and we'll look at how these historical patterns, they kind of continue to shape medical practices and, frankly, trust today. We'll be exploring how these ethical principles, which seemed so solid, so enshrined, have been repeatedly undermined, and the often unacknowledged complicity of major institutions and even corporations.
That's right. Our sources for this deep dive, they really paint a stark picture. Patterns of deception, exploitation, even collaboration between those who committed atrocities and those who supposedly prevented them.
It's deeply troubling.
It is. It's a challenging topic, absolutely, but one that offers, I think, incredible insights into power, morality, and the very foundations of trust in medicine. So let's unpack this.
Okay, so the story of modern medical ethics, well, its official start, anyway, really begins in 1947 with the Nuremberg Code.
Right after the war.
Exactly. And this wasn't, some dry academic thing pulled out of a textbook. It was forged directly, brutally from the horrific revelations of Nazi medical experiments.
The doctor's trial.
The Nuremberg doctor's trial, precisely. The scale and just the depravity of what came out there, it was so profound that the international community felt, well, compelled to establish these 10 fundamental principles for ethical human experimentation.
Sort of global promise.
Yes. They were meant to be a permanent, uncrossable line in the sand. A promise. Never again.
So what were some of those core principles? Because, like you said, our sources show this line in the sand was, well, almost immediately crossed. And repeatedly.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking how quickly. Okay, so among the most crucial principles, the ones that kept getting violated and honestly still echo today, are things like voluntary informed consent.
Meaning you have to know what you're signing up for.
Completely. Freely, willingly agree, understand all the risks, the procedures, the point of the study. Then there's the fundamental right to withdraw.
It can leave anytime.
Anytime, no penalty. Also, a really careful consideration of the risk-benefit ratio. The potential benefits to society or science absolutely have to outweigh the risks to the person.
Okay.
And critically, prioritizing subject welfare over experimental goals. The individual person, their health, their safety always comes first.
So clear rules, internationally recognized, yet almost right away, the United States, which, let's remember, played a leading role in setting these standards, started violating them. And not just far away, but right here, on American soil. The Tuskegee syphilis study. That's probably the most infamous, just heartbreaking example.
It really is. The Tuskegee syphilis study, conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service, it ran for an astonishing 40 years, 1932 to 1972, in rural Alabama.
40 years?
Yeah. It involved 399 black men who had syphilis and 201 who didn't as a control group. And these men, many poor, uneducated, they were tragically deceived right from the start.
How so?
They were told they had bad blood and were getting free health care for it, but they were never told they actually had syphilis, or that they were part of a scientific study designed purely to watch the disease destroy them if left untreated.
And the deliberate harm.
Yeah.
It wasn't just neglect, was it? It was an active choice.
Oh, absolutely. It's truly shocking. It's deliberate medical malfeasance, because when penicillin became the standard effective treatment for syphilis in the 1940s.
Which they knew.
They absolutely knew. The researchers deliberately withheld it from these men. Their explicit goal, written down, was to observe the natural progression of the disease to its grim endpoints.
So they just watched them suffer.
They watched them suffer. Blindness, debilitating mental illness, ultimately premature death from a treatable disease. And this single act, withholding treatment, It violated every single core principle of the Nuremberg Code.
No informed consent.
None. They didn't know they were in a study.
Couldn't withdraw.
Because they didn't know. No risk-benefit calculation because the risk was all on them.
And zero regard for their welfare.
Total disregard. And it didn't just affect them, it led to their wives getting infected and, tragically, congenital syphilis in their children. It only ended in 1972 when a whistleblower, Peter Buxton.
Right. He worked for the Public Health Service.
He did. He bravely exposed it to the press. That finally led to major reforms in research ethics. Finally.
And while Tuskegee was unfolding, slowly, horribly over decades, there was a similar, maybe even more aggressive experiment happening abroad, also run by the U.S. Public Health Service, but much faster. The Guatemala syphilis experiments.
Yes. And this is where the audacity, the disregard for human life just ramps up even more, from 1946 to 1948.
Right when the Nuremberg trials were happening.
Exactly. Right as the code was being hammered out. U.S. Public Health Service physician John Cutler, and get this, he later worked on Tuskegee. Seriously. He led these deliberate infection experiments in Guatemala. With the cooperation of Guatemalan officials, mind you, about 1,300 vulnerable people were intentionally infected with syphilis, gonorrhea, and chancroid.
And vulnerable feels like an understatement here. Who are they targeting and how do they infect them? This sounds less like research and more like biological warfare.
You're absolutely right. It was closer to that. They targeted the most vulnerable populations with, frankly, absolute impunity. Prisoners, soldiers, psychiatric patients, sex workers. The methods were horrifyingly direct, invasive.
Like what?
Paying infected prostitutes to have sex with prisoners, directly inoculating bacteria into subjects' penises, faces, arms, even putting infected materials in their eyes and urethras.
Oh my God.
And maybe the most chilling, performing spinal taps on children in psychiatric facilities as part of their research. This wasn't observation like Tuskegee. This was active, intentional infection, a form of biowarfare testing on unsuspecting human beings. At least 83 people died as a result, though, the official records sometimes dispute direct causation.
Using people as living petri dishes, deliberately making them sick. The ethical violations are just screaming.
Absolutely screaming. Complete, utter disregard for informed consent. Extreme harm, minimal, if any, benefit to the subjects, blatant exploitation of people totally unable to volunteer, and the sheer nerve conducting this while the world was processing Nazi horrors, while Nuremberg was codifying ethics. It's just
profound disregard.
Profound. And this dark chapter stayed secret for over 60 years, until historian Susan Raverby found the documents in 2010. That prompted a U.S. presidential apology, finally. And it really highlighted how American researchers didn't just fail to uphold the new standards, they actively exported these unethical practices.
And Guatemala wasn't, tragically, some isolated incident, was it? Our sources show this really disturbing, consistent pattern. U.S. researchers, institutions, exporting unethical medical practices after World War II, often targeting vulnerable populations elsewhere, leveraging desperation for free medical care as a cover.
It is a pattern, and that's what's so troubling. It suggests a systemic approach, not just, a few bad apples. Take the Pfizer-Trovin trial in Nigeria. This was 1996.
Relatively recent.
Very recent. During a severe meningitis outbreak in Kano, a chaotic, desperate situation, Pfizer tested an experimental antibiotic, Trovin, on 200 children. The violations were clear, egregious.
Like what specifically?
Well, first, the trial was done without proper, culturally appropriate consent. Many parents were illiterate, under extreme stress. Did they really understand?
Probably not.
And second, shocking really, the comparison drug, ceftriaxone, a known effective antibiotic, was given at a substantially reduced dose.
Why would they do that?
Well, it made it less effective in the control group, which, potentially skewed the results to make the experimental drug, Trovin, look better.
Stacking the deck.
Pretty much. There were even awful allegations that at least one child wasn't taken off Trovin when it clearly wasn't working, basically letting her suffer for the study's sake.
And the outcomes for these kids? Devastating.
Absolutely devastating. 11 children died in that trial. Many others suffered lifelong injuries, blindness, deafness, brain damage, paralysis, severe liver failure. A secret Nigerian government report later called it an illegal trial of an unregistered drug. And critically, a clear case of exploitation of the ignorant. It just exemplifies how companies sometimes exploit minimal regulations and desperate situations in developing nations, creating this cruel choice. Experimental medicine or no medicine at all.
And it wasn't just Pfizer. The sources mention others. AZT trials in Zimbabwe in '94, funded by the CDC and NIH, with really concerning side effects. Depo-Provera birth control tested on black women in Rhodesia in 1970s. And after approval, women on white-run farms were basically coerced into taking it.
Yeah, the coercion aspect is key there. And even more recently, look at a rotavirus vaccine study in India, 2011-2012. Again, NIH and Gates Foundation funding.
Okay.
This trial used placebo controls on infants for a disease that, at the time, killed 450,000 kids globally each year. Ethicists argued, look, effective vaccines exist. Is it ethical to give a placebo, withhold treatment in a place where kids are dying at such a high rate, even if you're testing a new vaccine's effectiveness?
That's a really tough ethical question.
It is. But these cases, they highlight this consistent issue. The promise of care becomes a way to run studies that would just never fly domestically because of stricter ethics.
And this pattern of exploiting, colonial subjects or vulnerable groups, it goes way back, early 1900s, Philippines, during the U.S. occupation.
That's right. Post-1898, during that colonial period, American forces had near absolute authority. They basically used Filipinos as experimental material. U.S. Army doctors infected 5 prisoners with bubonic plague, just to watch.
Just to watch.
Yeah. Separately, they induced beriberi, a severe vitamin deficiency in 29 prisoners. 4 died. And even worse, 1906, Professor Richard P. Strong from Harvard, a leading figure in tropical medicine, intentionally infected 24 Filipino prisoners with a cholera vaccine he knew was contaminated with bubonic plague.
He knew it was contaminated.
He knew, did it without consent, without their knowledge. 13 of those prisoners died directly from that contaminated vaccine.
Lethal experiments, no consent, targeting prisoners under military authority. These are Nuremberg violations decades before Nuremberg existed. Shows a long willingness to ignore ethics for science.
Precisely. And even after WWII, the pattern didn't stop. There are documented reports of unethical research on Puerto Ricans and Filipinos. Things like total body irradiation, high doses of radiation, unethical birth control testing leading to sterilization, careless use of contaminated vaccines, all under the guise of research.
So the pattern is clear.
Undeniable. Across time, across locations, U.S. researchers consistently exploiting vulnerable groups in developing nations, using lax regulations to do studies banned at home. It's a chilling echo of Guatemala, showing this deeply ingrained willingness to sacrifice others for data.
As disturbing as all that is, the context for modern medical ethics always goes back to the Nazis. And it's startling, really, to learn the Holocaust's true medical origins weren't in the camps, but actually in hospitals.
That's the chilling reality. The T4 euthanasia program started in 1939. It wasn't just a precursor, it was the foundational blueprint for Nazi genocide. This program systematically murdered disabled individuals. But in doing so, it also meticulously established the methods, the infrastructure, and crucially, the personnel who would later be transferred directly to the final solution. It normalized medical murder on an industrial scale.
So the killing began with their own citizens, those deemed unworthy of life.
Yes, and it escalated systematically. It started with disabled infants and children, the Children's Euthanasia Program, often deceiving parents about the treatment. Then it expanded to adults with mental illness, intellectual disabilities, physical handicaps, often taken from institutions.
How do they kill them initially?
Lethal injections or systematic starvation. Doctors like Herman Fenmiller pioneered starvation as a, quote, humane method. But by 1940, they developed carbon monoxide gas chambers at 6 main killing centers: Hartheim, Sonnenstein, Grafenach, Hadamar, Bernburg, Brandenburg.
Prototypes for the death camps.
Exactly. Devastating prototypes for places like Auschwitz.
And who were the key figures driving this horror, besides the countless doctors involved?
Dr. Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal physician, led the program with Philip Buhler, high-ranking medical professionals. And the legacy spread. Dr. Irmfried Abril, a T4 doctor, later commanded Treblinka, one of the deadliest extermination camps.
How many people were killed in T4?
Around 275,000. Disabled children, psychiatric patients, elderly residents, eventually prisoners unfit for work. When public protests officially ended the overt program in 1941, really just a tactical pause by Hitler, the personnel, the methods, the mindset of medical murder transferred directly to the Holocaust machinery.
No remorse from the leaders.
None. At his trial, Karl Brandt showed zero remorse. He defiantly declared, "Death can mean relief. It was never meant to be murder." Terrifying insight into how twisted ethics can become.
And then, the ultimate irony. Betrayal of justice. Operation Paperclip, the U.S. bringing Nazi doctors involved in these atrocities directly into American science and intelligence, giving them a fresh start.
It's a truly dark, ethically compromised chapter. Dr. Hubertus Struckhold, for instance, often called the father of space medicine, designed the spacesuit, launched a monkey into space, brought to the U.S. in '47 via paperclip.
But his war record.
Throughout WWII, he was chief of aeromedical research for Goering's Luftwaffe, where horrific high-altitude and freezing experiments were done on concentration camp prisoners.
And under Walter Schreiber, Wehrmacht Surgeon General, very high ranking.
Schreiber came over in '51, got a job at the Air Force School of Medicine in Texas, but shortly after, the Boston Globe bravely exposed him, accused him of direct involvement in human experiments by Kurt Bloom at Ravensbrück.
What happened to him?
He managed to emigrate to Argentina, apparently with U.S. military help. It highlights this pattern. Protect valuable assets, even mass murderers.
And Dr. Kurt Bloom, Deputy Reich Health Leader, he admitted to plague vaccine experiments on prisoners, and unbelievably acquitted at Nuremberg.
Unbelievably, yes. His acquittal was largely due to direct U.S. intervention. They saw him as a crucial asset expert in biological weapons, so he was promptly hired by Sidney Gottlieb.
The infamous CIA guy behind MKUltra.
That's him, hired by Gottlieb for MKUltra and by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps for Chemical Warfare Research, Project 63.
The irony is just sickening. Gottlieb, whose Jewish parents fled persecution, working with Bloom, who did lethal experiments on prisoners.
It's profound. Bloom's expertise in mass human experimentation, born from Nazi atrocities, directly informed America's own unethical drug and mind control experiments like MKUltra. The architects of medical atrocities found freedom, a new home, a purpose within U.S. intelligence, blurring ethical lines almost beyond recognition.
And a lot of these disturbing collaborations, especially between ex-Nazi scientists and U.S. intelligence, they sort of converged at this place called Camp King in Germany. Started as a detention center for Nazis, but then became something, well, much darker. A CIA black site. A crucible for enhanced interrogation techniques.
Yeah, Camp King's evolution is pretty stark. From '46 through the late '50s, it changed dramatically. House captured Nazis initially, sure. But by '48, its main occupants were Soviet bloc spies, the new Cold War enemy.
So it became a Cold War facility?
A black site, yeah. For over a decade. Ideal, off-the-books place to develop enhanced interrogation techniques. It was discreet, had a steady stream of Soviet prisoners, and crucially, provided access to valuable intel sources, including former Nazi scientists.
And this is where those Nazi doctors pop up again, right? Not just low-level guys.
Absolutely not. Former Nazi doctors like Dr. Walter Schreiber and Dr. Kurt Bloom, the ones we just talked about, they weren't just there, they were directly employed as chief medical officers at Camp King. These ex-Nazi scientists were intimately involved in developing interrogation techniques using drugs like LSD and hypnosis.
So the methods came directly from Nazi techniques.
Our sources say there is substantial documented evidence that the methods used at Camp King originated from or directly incorporated Nazi techniques, a horrifying inheritance.
So the U.S. was actively adopting, maybe even perfecting, Nazi research on human control, interrogation.
That's the chilling conclusion, yeah. The CIA developed these post-war enhanced interrogation techniques at Camp King under Operation Bluebird, a direct predecessor to MKUltra. First tested right there.
How did they test them?
Well, in 1952, Soviet spies were interrogated using, quote, light dosages of drugs coupled with hypnosis to induce complete hypnotic trances and total amnesia. The U.S. military developed programs based in part by research conducted by Nazi doctors during the war. They were obsessed with truth drugs, hypnosis.
And there's this figure, Kurt Plutner. Not famous, but seems like he had a huge impact.
It's Plutner, yeah. A Nazi doctor who, during the war, gave mescaline to Jewish prisoners and Soviet POWs specifically for truth serum research. Documented their reactions, the effects.
And the U.S. recruited him.
Recruited by American intelligence in 1945. His reports, based on experiments at Dachau concentration camp on speech and truth-inducing drugs, directly informed U.S. Naval Intelligence's Project Chatter and later MKUltra. He was actually protected from French prosecution by the U.S.
Wow.
Stephen Kinzer, the historian, author of Poisoner in Chief, states it plainly. He says CIA's MKUltra was a continuation of these earlier Nazi experiments, hiring vivisectionists and torturers who would work in Japan and in Nazi concentration camps to come and explain what they had found out so that we could build on their research. The moral cost immeasurable.
And if that wasn't enough, the phrase interrogated to death shows up in the sources about Camp King.
Yeah.
This sounds like way more than just drugs. Sounds brutal.
It absolutely does. interrogated to death is profoundly disturbing. It strongly suggests extreme physical methods, not just mind-altering drugs. We're likely talking high-voltage electroshock, possibly fatal, severe physical abuse, maybe even crude psychosurgery to alter personality or memory. It contradicts any idea these were just subtle drug interrogations, indicates it was far more brutal, echoing Nazi torture practices.
And a CIA scientist, Frank Olson, he wasn't just aware, he saw it happen.
Frank Olson was a direct, horrified witness.
Yeah.
He traveled to Germany, Frankfurt, Berlin, Heidelberg, specifically to observe these interrogation sessions. What he saw shattered him.
What did he say he saw?
He later recounted seeing victims who would occasionally die from trauma of the tactics used.
Yeah.
He saw people literally interrogated to death in experimental methods combining drugs, hypnosis, and torture to attempt to master brainwashing techniques and memory erasing.
And he objected.
Profoundly. His ethical objections, his increasing vocal distress, they likely led to his own mysterious death. Officially ruled a suicide after he was unknowingly given LSD by his CIA superiors.
His son has been fighting to uncover the truth for decades, right?
Eric Olson, yes, spent decades tirelessly documenting this dark history. He argues persuasively his father was killed to stop him exposing deeply classified U.S. biological warfare during the Korean War and the torture and execution of Soviet agents and expendable ex-Nazis in these black sites.
For listeners who want to dig deeper into Eric Olson's work, where can they look?
The Frank Olson Project website, frankolsonproject.com, is the key resource, filled with documents, testimony, Eric's journey. Also, powerful documentaries like Codename Artichoke, and especially Errol Morris's great Netflix series Wormwood, featuring Eric Olson extensively, plus academic articles, legal records, books like H.P. Albarelli Jr.'s A Terrible Mistake, and Stephen Kinzer's Poisoner in Chief. Eric's efforts have preserved crucial testimony about these hidden, morally indefensible operations, a vital counter-narrative.
The shadow of unethical experiments. It stretches far beyond Camp King and the early Cold War, doesn't it? Our sources paint this broad, disturbing picture of U.S. human experimentation after WWII, drugs, radiation, biological agents, even targeting specific vulnerable communities, often without anyone knowing.
That's right. It's a wide spectrum. In drug experimentation, you've got the infamous MK-Ultra and related programs, 50s to 70s, CIA, military personnel given LSD, other psychoactive drugs, often without consent, exploring mind control, truth serums, that kind of thing.
And military tests.
Yeah, the Army tested the incapacitating agent BZ, a potent hallucinogen, on soldiers at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland in the 60s. And for decades, 50s through 70s, thousands of soldiers at Edgewood participated in tests involving nerve agents like sarin, mustard gas, other chemical weapons. Not just theory, direct, often undisclosed exposure.
Then there's radiation exposure. The scale of experiments on U.S. citizens was shocking. Only really came out during the Clinton administration, right?
Indeed. Thanks to investigative reporting by Eileen Wilson in '93, revealed over 4,000 federally sponsored radiation experiments between 1944 and 1974. Tens of thousands of unwitting patients, citizens. Clinton formed the ACHRE committee in response.
And some of the cases were just horrific. Like the Fernald School?
Yeah, Fernald School in Massachusetts, a state school for intellectually disabled kids. 1946 to 53, MIT researchers fed 74 boys, ages 10 to 17, breakfast cereal with radioactive iron and calcium tracers, recruited them into a science club, gave them Red Sox tickets, but neither kids nor parents gave adequate, informed consent for eating radioactive material. They got a $1.85 million settlement in '98. Decades later.
And it wasn't just kids in institutions.
No. 18 patients, mostly terminally ill, including a 4-year-old boy, were injected with plutonium, highly toxic, to study how the body handles it. The Vanderbilt study gave 800 pregnant women radioactive iron cocktails to study iron absorption, again, without full disclosure.
And the nuclear testing.
Military personnel participated in atmospheric nuclear tests in Nevada, the Pacific, often inadequately protected, led to long-term health issues for many atomic veterans. Some service members were even intentionally exposed to radiation just to study its effects. Living laboratories.
The biological agent testing also has some deeply unsettling parts, especially moving from labs to releasing things on unsuspecting cities.
This is lesser known but equally disturbing. Now, Operation Whitecoat, 5473, involved over 2,300 soldiers, many Seventh-day Adventist conscientious objectors, who volunteered with informed consent to be infected with pathogens for biodefense research at Fort Detrick. That's one thing.
Okay, they volunteered.
But then you have urban open-air testing on unwitting civilians.
Like Operation Sea Spray in San Francisco Bay. That sounds ominous.
It was. 1950, the Navy released Bacillus sclobigi, thought harmless then, now known related to anthrax over San Francisco Bay and other cities. The aim? Chilling. To see how vulnerable a big city was to bioweapon attack. One man died from a rare infection after, though causation disputed.
And New York City, too.
1966, military researchers spread Bacillus subtilis variant. Niger, another supposed simulant in the NYC subway, dropped light bulbs full of bacteria onto tracks in Midtown. Exposed millions.
On millions of people without their knowledge.
Yeah.
Using the air they breathe, the subway they ride. What was the justification?
Exactly. Officials claimed harmless simulants, later admitted even those could put a certain segment, immunocompromised, elderly at risk. These tests, revealed in 76-77, basically proved the feasibility of covering large areas with biological weapons agents. Done without consent, caused huge outrage when uncovered.
And then the really unsettling allegations of targeting Black communities specifically for these kinds of tests.
This is particularly sensitive. In Florida and Georgia, there are allegations stemming from Scientology-led investigations using financial records of a CIA release of whooping cough bacteria over Tampa Bay in '55. Cases jumped dramatically afterwards. But, important caveat, not officially confirmed by CIA. Source has its own agenda.
Okay, but the Army yellow fever mosquito experiments seem more documented, more troubling.
Yes, perhaps more concerning due to direct military involvement and specific targeting. Operation Big Buzz in '55, Operation Dropkick '56-58. The Army released between 300,000 and 1 million uninfected mosquitoes from planes, ground dispersal.
Uninfected, they claim.
They claim. But these operations explicitly, deliberately targeted predominantly Black neighborhoods. Carver Village in Savannah, Georgia. Avon Park, Florida. In Avon Park, dozens of Black people got sick. 8 people died shortly after the releases. While the military insists the mosquitoes were clean, the secrecy, the targeting of vulnerable groups, the health impacts, it fuels deep distrust, raises profound ethical questions. The release is well documented, even if the exact cause of illness is debated.
And we can't forget Agent Orange, tested domestically, not just used in Vietnam.
Crucial point. Agent Orange is infamous for Vietnam, but documented testing, storage, disposal of these toxic herbicides happened at numerous U.S. military sites, 40s to 70s. A 2006 DoD report named 32 locations. Eglin AFB, Fort Detrick, Avon Park Air Force Range.
And veterans exposed here struggled.
Often struggle to get recognition. Benefits. Incomplete or contested military records. Shows the long-term impact of these tests right here on American soil.
Maybe one of the most heartbreaking, ethically indefensible cases involves AIDS drugs tested on foster children in New York City. 80s to early 2000s. Their vulnerability makes it particularly tough.
Truly devastating. A shocking abuse of power over a captive population. The Incarnation Children's Center, ICC, a nursing facility for HIV-positive kids in NYC foster care. Affiliated with the Archdiocese, Columbia University, ICC got paid for hosting experimental trials.
On foster kids.
Kids as young as 3 months old, wards of the state, often no family advocates, enrolled in highly controversial and secretive drug experiments. Our sources say if a child refused the meds AZT, DDL, 3TC, nevirapine, all with FDA black box warnings for severe toxicity.
What happened?
They were force-fed through a PEG tube, surgically implanted feeding tube.
And who funded this? Allowed it?
Significant federal agencies. Dr. Anthony Fauci's NIAID, the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development, plus major pharma companies, Merck, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Pfizer. Investigative journalist Liam Sheff broke the story in 2003-2004.
What did the investigation find?
A 2009 Vera Institute investigation found 80 of the 532 kids died while in foster care. 25 died while enrolled in these trials. Vera staff concluded no death was directly caused by trial meds, but noted 22 of those 25 had multiple AIDS complications before enrollment. Still, it's a stark, chilling example. Using captive, vulnerable children for experimental chemo with known severe toxicities, often without proper advocacy or true consent protections.
And finally, a more recent example that almost happened shows the ongoing tension. The EPA's CHEERS study.
The Children's Environmental Exposure Research Study, CHEERS, proposed in Duval County, Florida, 2004-2005, aimed to study kids' exposure to household pesticides. Its design was immediately controversial. It targeted 60 young kids whose parents frequently sprayed pesticides. And crucially, families had to agree to keep using pesticides during the study. To incentivize them, they promised up to $970, T-shirt, certificate, camcorder.
So paying poor families to expose their kids to pesticides.
Critics called it exactly that. Intentional dosing. Creating an economic incentive for low-income families, often people of color, to expose their kids to potentially harmful chemicals.
And the industry funding.
Big red flag. The EPA, meant to protect us, was getting $2 million from the American Chemistry Council, a powerful chemical company lobby group.
Right.
Faced huge opposition. Congress, public, Senator Barbara Boxer threatened to derail the EPA admin's nomination. So Stephen L. Johnson, the administrator, canceled the study in 2005.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thankfully halted before it caused harm. But it reveals the constant pressure on ethical boundaries, especially when corporate money is involved. And this pattern, it isn't just a U.S. thing. It extends globally, often powered by the pervasive influence of pharmaceutical companies. A recurring kind of insidious model is offering free care as a deceptive cover for experimentation, especially in developing countries.
So clinical trials become basically the only way people can get medical care. That creates an immediate, huge ethical problem.
Exactly. In low and middle income countries, joining a trial is often the only way patients get any treatment or access to cutting-edge drugs. Creates enormous risk for exploitation, desperate health needs plus financial incentives from researchers.
And for pharma, it's cheaper, faster.
Yeah. These countries offer larger treatment-naive populations, people not exposed to many drugs, so trial results are clearer. It significantly cuts costs and recruitment time, a powerful incentive for pharma to operate where regulations are minimal or oversight less strict.
The Pfizer-Trovan case in Nigeria, we touched on it, seems like a prime, devastating example of this free care as cover.
Textbook case of exploitation, 1996, terrible meningitis epidemic in Kano, Nigeria. Pfizer tested experimental Trovan on 200 kids. Exploitation was blatant. Trial done in chaos, without proper consent. Plus, they gave a reduced dose of the comparison drug, ceftriaxone.
The known effective drug.
Right, making it less effective, stacking the deck for Trovan. Parents said they weren't told it was experimental, thought it was standard life-saving medicine. Outcome, tragic. 11 kids died, dozens suffered lifelong injuries, blindness, paralysis, brain damage.
And the Nigerian report
Called it an illegal trial of an unregistered drug, a clear case of exploitation of the ignorant. It highlighted how international guidelines like ICH-GCP were often looser than Nuremberg or Helsinki, allowing lower standards based on local standards, basically a two-tiered ethical system.
And after the trials end, do those communities even get the drugs that were tested on them affordably?
Rarely, if ever. Research in these countries is constantly criticized for exporting risk without ensuring the resulting products are affordable or accessible to the populations who bore that risk. It essentially becomes a cost-effective test site for drugs benefiting wealthier nations, leaving the participants behind.
And this free drug model,
Yeah.
pharma uses it domestically too, right? Patient assistance programs.
Yes. PAPs in the U.S. offer free or cheaper drugs to people who can't afford them. Seems good individually, but critics argue it serves a dual purpose. Deflects attention from incredibly high drug prices, bolsters company reputation, lets them maintain high prices for everyone else and avoid government price regulation. It's strategic marketing, lobbying, more than pure charity.
Shifting focus a bit, let's look at unethical medical experimentation in Israel. Not often discussed alongside these other historical abuses, but our sources point to significant issues, particularly within their military.
No, it's not widely known, but yeah, significant ethical issues reported, especially in the Israeli military. Clinical trials reportedly went on for over 35 years without fully informing soldiers about the drugs or risks. Take the 1971 nerve gas antidote experiments. New recruits were given voluntary pills daily, didn't know it was an experimental nerve gas antidote previously only tested on animals, not meant for long-term human use. Conditions were coercive, refuse, and you're rejected from elite units, basically forced participation.
And other military experiments besides nerve gas antidotes.
Yes. Anthrax vaccine experiments on IDF soldiers in the early 90s later found ethically unjustifiable by an Israel Medical Association panel because Israel already had enough vaccine. In 94, soldiers were reportedly forced to drink magnesium as new recruits, again without details or consent.
And radiation?
Documented higher cancer risk lymphomas, leukemias among soldiers, defense workers exposed to radiofrequency radiation, with inadequate IDF follow-up. Notably, ethicist Prof. Asa Kasher, who wrote the IDF Code of Conduct, maintains experiments can be done on soldiers if they help build the military force. Chillingly highlights how military needs can override individual ethics. Creates a dangerous loophole.
And it wasn't just the military. Civilian hospitals, too, even affecting the most vulnerable.
Indeed. Israel's state comptroller, Eliezer Goldberg, revealed a shocker. Thousands of Israelis' infants, toddlers, demented elderly included in illegal experiments without proper consent. 2 hospitals tried an unapproved drug on infants, toddlers, required invasive eardrum piercing, small risk of hearing loss, approved by local committees but without required higher ministry approval.
What's the status now?
After legal challenges, public outcry, the military eventually agreed to health ministry oversight, but notably resisted an immediate halt to all experiments on soldiers. Shows ongoing institutional resistance to full transparency.
The AZT controversy is another huge example. Pharma influence, public health crisis. Hailed as a victory for AIDS patients, but its history is way more complicated, deeply troubling.
You're right. The victory narrative for AZT was powerful. Fastest FDA approval ever, 19 weeks, usually takes years. Celebrated by desperate AIDS activists as a breakthrough. But the problem? AZT's toxicity was known before approval.
It wasn't a new drug.
Failed cancer drug from the 60s.
Right.
Known carcinogen, mutagen, highly toxic to human cells even at prescribed doses. Severe side effects, extreme anemia, headaches, nausea so bad they unblinded the original trial. Doctors, nurses could easily tell who was on AZT, who wasn't. Compromised the whole double blind, crucial for science.
So the approval itself was based on a flawed trial. Major ethical problems there.
Absolutely. Critically flawed trial, compromised data. John Lauritsen, an investigative journalist, argued compellingly in his book, Poison by Prescription, the AZT story using FDA documents, that the AZT approval study was simply fraudulent.
Fraudulent. Strong word.
He detailed specific violations. Double-blind broken, AZT group got way more supportive care, like blood transfusions biasing results, widespread protocol violations. He cited patient #1009 ineligible, already taking AZT, assigned to placebo, continued AZT, died after dropping out, counted as a placebo death to make AZT look better.
He used incredibly strong language, didn't he? Called it murder.
Lauritsen did, characterized it as iatrogenic homicide death caused by medical treatment. Due to what he saw as systematic scientific fraud, pharma profiteering, regulatory capture, he argued the AIDS crisis urgency, while real, let safety protocols be bypassed. And crucially, the intense focus on AZT monopolized research, leaving over 100 other promising drugs uninvestigated. The real victory, Lauritsen argued, was for Burroughs Wellcome's profits, not necessarily long-term patient benefit or finding less toxic treatments. Shows how profit can profoundly distort science and care.
Our sources take us even deeper now, into the unseen hands of power, exposing the pervasive complicity of major corporations, especially German giants, in the Nazi regime's industrial slavery. And it's critical to get this. Pre-Nuremberg German medical ethics actually had laws forbidding unethical experiments. This wasn't a vacuum.
That's a crucial, often overlooked point. It refutes any claim of ignorance. The guidelines for new therapy and human experimentation, published Feb 1931, were binding law across Germany, remarkably progressive for the time.
What did they require?
Full, unambiguous, informed consent. Caution for subjects under 18. Mandated experiments benefit patient or society. Risks minimized. This means Nazi experiments weren't just morally abhorrent, they were legally criminal under existing German law.
So Nuremberg wasn't creating rules from scratch.
Largely not. The Nuremberg Code was heavily based on these pre-existing German guidelines. 6 of its 10 principles came directly from them. Fundamentally undermines any claim there were no laws to violate. The Nazis deliberately broke their own advanced ethical code.
So they deliberately broke their own laws. Terrifying how easily principles get discarded when ideology takes over. And they didn't just kill people. They developed this brutal policy. Vernichtung begonnen Arbeit. Extermination through work, making murder profitable.
Yes, official Nazi policy. Designed not just for elimination, but to systematically work prisoners to death, extract maximum labor value economically while achieving genocidal goals. Average life expectancy in some labor camps. Brutal, 3 to 6 months.
And the camps were distribution centers.
Major camps like Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald. They weren't just prisons, they were hubs, sorting, exploiting, deploying prisoners to factories, mines, construction sites all over Germany. The vast majority of the 42,500 plus Nazi camps were labor camps.
And workers were systematically killed at these industrial sites, people as disposable resources for profit.
Absolutely. Routinely beaten, starved, executed when deemed unproductive, too weak. Companies like IG Farben, the massive chemical conglomerate, Bayer, Hoechst, BASF.
Huge names.
Huge. Operated a monstrous synthetic rubber fuel plant at Auschwitz-Monowitz. 25,000 to 30,000 prisoners died building and working their plant. Chillingly, company officials were directly involved in selections for death, deciding who was too weak, sending them to die. Deliberate murder for profit, with corporate Germany as an active participant.
And the corporate complicity, even American companies, is shocking. IBM's central role in Nazi logistics enabled the Holocaust itself, according to our sources.
Profoundly chilling, the technological complicity. IBM's Hollerith punch card tech was absolutely fundamental. Systematic record-keeping, logistical efficiency for both the euthanasia program and the Holocaust.
How did it enable it?
Enabled all 6 phases. Identification via racial census. IBM Germany, DHOMAG, invented that. Then exclusion, confiscation, ghettoization, deportation, extermination. Custom punch cards designed for Nazi purposes. Specific hole for Jew. Code for death by gas chamber.
In every camp.
Every concentration camp, including Auschwitz, had a Hollerith department. Meticulously tracked inmates, managed labor, recorded deaths, the Auschwitz tattoo numbers, 5-digit Hollerith numbers. Our sources state IBM headquarters in New York managed these services, provided parts, expertise, knew their systems were used in the camps for these horrific purposes.
And the list of companies in this widespread industrial slavery is huge. German giants, U.S.-owned operations.
Truly extensive. German giants, IG Farben, Bayer, Hoechst, BASF, Krupp, Siemens, BMW, Volkswagen, Daimler-Benz, Thyssen. Audi used 20,000 forced laborers, 3,700 camp inmates, deemed morally responsible for 4,500 deaths. Construction like Eternit, Holtzmann, but crucially, U.S. companies. Ford Motor Company via Fordwerk, General Motors via Opel, IBM, even Hugo Boss uniforms. All had German operations actively building military vehicles, aircraft engines, parts using slave labor.
And the victims weren't only Jewish people, though they were the main target.
No. Jews were the largest group, around 6 million murdered. But the Nazi slave system also brutalized Soviet POWs, 3M killed, Polish civilians, 1.83M murdered, Roma Sinti, 220K, 500K murdered, disabled, 275K murdered in T4, political prisoners, Jehovah's Witnesses, LGBTQ plus asocials, and a staggering 13-20 million Soviet civilians.
How did the companies get the labor?
The SS acted as ruthless business managers, built subcamps near company facilities, sorted prisoners for labor, systematically replaced dead or incapacitated workers. Deep transactional collaboration between SS and corporate Germany.
And despite this massive scale, this systemic use of humans as disposable assets, there was a grand cover-up. Staggering lack of accountability after the war. Justice largely evaded.
The Nazi leadership, especially Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary, planned a sophisticated financial escape. Set up 750 corporations in neutral countries, ready to receive German wealth, patents, industrial info, anticipating defeat. Over half of German capital in Switzerland used for holding companies for IG Farben, Merck, Siemens, Osram, Henkel, safeguarding assets.
Did the Allies try to stop it?
Allied efforts like Operation Safe Haven tried, but often failed. Significant Nazi wealth, and critically, many war criminals successfully escaped justice, vanished into new lives.
And incredibly, even American figures were implicated in managing these Nazi-linked assets well into the post-war period.
Yes. Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's grandfather, his Union Banking Corporation, UBC, seized by U.S. in '42 under Trading with the Enemy Act. UBC managed banking for Fritz Thyssen, prominent industrialist, early Hitler financier. Bush's links extended to Consolidated Silesian Steel Co., used Nazi slave labor from Auschwitz. His business relationships with Nazi interests continued via various corporate structures well into post-war, often via Switzerland, Panama, Argentina, Brazil. An underreported aspect of American business collaboration complicates the narrative.
And accountability for these horrific crimes, almost non-existent on a grand scale, so few punished.
Profound, infuriating injustice. Hundreds of thousands participated: administrators, guards, doctors, clerks. Hundreds of companies profited, millions of civilians involved, number punished, minuscule. Nuremberg trials, 200 major defendants, subsequent trials, maybe 5,000, 10,000 total, vast majority, hundreds of thousands. No consequences.
Why not?
Cold War priorities quickly abandoned denazification.
Yeah.
West Germany needed as anti-Soviet ally. Many high-ranking Nazis hired by U.S. intelligence Operation Paperclip, as we discussed. Most perpetrators lived normal, prosperous lives post-war. Horrific pasts conveniently overlooked.
And here's the ultimate irony, almost a dark joke. Nazi doctors even held leadership roles in the World Medical Association, WMA, the very organization founded because of Nazi medical atrocities.
Truly one of the most shocking, infuriating parts of this history, a profound institutional betrayal. WMA, founded in 1947, direct response to Nazis to establish, uphold international medical ethics. Yet, after West Germany joined in 1951, German physicians with direct Nazi ties were elected to leadership positions in this very organization. Hans-Joachim Suhring, SS member, accused of sending a disabled child to her death. Ernst Fromm, SAS member, WMA president, 1973-74. Karl Heidenkamp, Nazi Party SA member, led the German Medical Association.
Did anyone protest?
The Alliance for Human Research Protection, AHRP, explicitly calls this a disgrace. Notes the WMA became dominated by Nazi-affiliated doctors. And shockingly, the American medical community largely did not protest their importation or rise to leadership. Wasn't an instant takeover, but gradual systemic rehabilitation, allowed by Cold War pragmatism, deep institutional complicity, profoundly undermining the WMA's founding principles. Makes you wonder how much they truly learned or just whitewashed.
As if the Nazi atrocities weren't enough, our sources unveil the horrific scale of the Japanese biowarfare program, Unit 731, and the subsequent U.S. cover-up that granted complete immunity to its perpetrators, allowing them to escape justice for their gruesome research data.
Unit 731 was immense, clandestine, utterly depraved. At its peak, General Shiro Ishii's network, he was the mastermind, had over 10,000 personnel. Total reached 20,000 across its sites. Operated 26 known killing labs, experimental detachments across occupied Asia, mostly Manchuria, China.
And their methods.
Unspeakably cruel, barbaric, live vivisections without anesthesia, dismemberments, deliberate bacterial inoculations, plague, anthrax, cholera, typhus, frostbite experiments, freezing limbs, thawing to study gangrene, syphilis infections, forced amputations.
And who are the victims? Just Chinese civilians.
Primarily Chinese, yes, but also White Russians, anti-communist refugees in Manchuria, and critically, Allied POWs, including Americans. U.S. intelligence actually confirmed experiments on American POWs at Mukden, a Unit 731 camp.
Medicine itself must become a weapon. That was their idea.
Truly embodied it. Performed human experimentation for the entire Japanese medical community, an ongoing, horrifying feedback loop, sharing findings across their scientific establishment.
And then the immunity deal, an Operation Paperclip of the East. Justice traded for data.
Precisely. A stark moral stain. General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander in Japan, granted complete immunity from war crimes prosecution to Japanese biowarfare personnel in exchange for their research data. May 1947.
They paid for it.
The U.S. government paid 150,000, 200,000 yen for this gruesome data, essentially buying the silence and findings of murderers. Unlike Nazi doctors, none involved with Unit 731 were prosecuted by the United States.
Wow.
Soviets held the Khabarovsk trials in 49, prosecuted 12, but lenient sentences, all back in Japan by 56.
And these perpetrators,
Yeah.
doctors who did unspeakable things,
Yep.
just continued their careers, lived normally.
Shockingly, yes. Many Unit 731 doctors went on to prominent, celebrated careers. Japanese universities, hospitals, industry. Some became governor of Tokyo, president of the Japanese Medical Association.
And the experiments might have continued after the war.
Even more disturbing, The Guardian reported that after the war, former Unit 731 members continued human experiments on Japanese prisoners, babies, mental patients. And get this. Allegedly, with secret U.S. government funding from 1947 to 1956, highlights a deep, almost amoral willingness to leverage horrific research, regardless of origin or ongoing ethical breaches.
This dark legacy, acquiring their data, it leads to lingering allegations of U.S. biowarfare, especially during the Korean War.
In 1951-52, North Korea and China accused the U.S. of dropping infected insects, feathers, bacteria bombs, claiming U.S. biowarfare. Now, declassified Soviet documents later revealed these specific claims were fabricated. Propaganda even used infected prisoners to create evidence.
But the context.
Exactly. It's crucial to remember the U.S. did have active bioweapons research programs and had just acquired the Unit 731 data. So while those specific allegations were false, the broader context fueled deep suspicion and distrust.
And similar allegations surfaced about Cuba. Persistent belief in U.S. biowarfare attacks there.
Yes, from the 60s to the 90s. Strongest circumstantial evidence. The African swine fever, ASF outbreak in Cuba, 1971. First appearance of ASF virus in the Western Hemisphere. Suspiciously coincided with U.S. covert ops. Critically, Plum Island, U.S. bioweapons research facility off New York, was the only known regional location with the virus.
And dengue fever.
In 1981, dengue fever outbreak. Dengue 2 strain, not previously in the Caribbean, appeared simultaneously in 3 separate areas hundreds of miles apart in Cuba. U.S. had researched dengue for offensive BW attacks. Other claims involve alleged sugar contamination 62, Newcastle disease 62, agricultural pests 96.
What's the U.S. position?
Official denials. Call allegations disinformation. While many remain unsubstantiated, the 1971 swine fever case especially remains highly credible, widely cited, demonstrates the persistent shadow of suspicion cast by past actions and acquiring Unit 731 data. What's really critical to grasp here is how all these historical patterns, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, U.S. abuses, corporate complicity, they contribute to a systemic erosion of medical ethics. And how the control of information, often through financial influence, plays this profound, often unseen role. The pharmaceutical industry especially exerts pervasive influence on major medical organizations, the ones meant to be ethical guardians.
Like the AMA here and the WMA, the World Medical Association. The AMA actually started the WMA, didn't it, in 1947, right after Nuremberg, specifically to reestablish international ethics.
And that's where the irony just deepens, becomes a source of ongoing controversy. Both the AMA in the U.S. and WMA globally get significant funding from pharmaceutical companies. Various ways. Lucrative advertising in their journals, like JAMA. Massive conference sponsorships, funding for continuing medical education programs for doctors, direct research grants, creates powerful, almost irresistible financial dependencies.
And the result?
Both organizations consistently oppose drug price controls, vigorously support strong pharma patent protections ensuring high profits. They rarely, if ever, challenge pharma safety claims or pricing, even when public health advocates raise alarms.
So it's not direct control, but more like subtle, profound regulatory capture.
Exactly. That's the term, regulatory capture. Imagine a watchdog guarding the chicken coop. But over time, it gets so friendly with the foxes, maybe relies on them for food influence, that it subtly starts looking out for the foxes first, not the chickens. That's basically what happens when organizations meant for public medical interests become so financially, ideologically aligned with pharma that they prioritize industry profits over public health, patient welfare.
And that leads to opposing cheaper generics.
Right. Opposing generic drug production, compulsory licensing that would lower prices, often marginalizing traditional or alternative medicines in favor of expensive pharmaceutical solutions that benefit the industry.
This pervasive influence leads straight to a profound erosion of medical ethics, shifting from traditional focus on the individual patient towards what's often framed as universal care or population health, sometimes at the expense of the individual.
This is a fundamental, often unnoticed shift in medical philosophy. Traditional ethics, dominant pre-1970s, focus squarely on the individual patient. Primum non nocere, first, do no harm. Emphasize truly voluntary informed consent for each patient. Sacred right to refuse treatment. Physicians' individualized judgment. Unique patient-doctor relationship.
But that changed.
From the 80s onward, a pronounced shift towards population-based ethics. Driven by public health initiatives, managed care. Focus moves to aggregate outcomes. Individual needs, autonomy may be subtly or overtly subordinated for the perceived greater good of the population.
How does that show up?
Standardized protocols. Evidence-based medicine becoming one-size-fits-all. Quality metrics measuring doctor adherence to guidelines, not individual outcomes. Universal interventions, mass vaccination, standardized drug protocols.
And that changes the patient-doctor relationship, makes it less personal.
Absolutely. Tangible erosion of individualized care. Physicians pressured to follow strict protocols, EHR prompts, insurance mandates. Informed consent changes, too. Might focus on population stats, generalized risks, not individual risk factors. Limited discussion of alternatives, sometimes subtle pressure, coercion to comply.
Broader implications.
Loss of medical individualization patients as data points. Expansion of disease definitions, more people needing intervention. Strong focus on chronic disease management, preventative interventions, targeting healthy people for pharma solutions, often industry-driven.
Sounds like kind of a return to paternalistic medicine.
Yeah.
The system tells you what's best rather than you deciding.
In many ways, yes. Ethical consequences include that subtle return of paternalism, we know what's best for you, from authorities, concerning loss of patient autonomy, inherent conflicts of interest, doctors' loyalty divided between patient and institutional corporate protocols, potential suppression of dissenting medical opinions.
So the core question is,
Should medicine prioritize individual patient welfare and autonomy, or population outcomes when they conflict? The current system often treats ethics mainly as a compliance exercise. Institutional interests, financial considerations frequently take precedence over individual patient welfare and true autonomy.
and groups focus on ethical research. They've specifically called out this irony, right? The guardians seeming compromised.
Yes. Groups like the Alliance for Human Research Protection, AHRP, explicitly vocally point out the disgrace of organizations like WMA having Nazi doctors in leadership after the war, highlight how the medical establishment largely failed to protest. AHRP others comment on how the ongoing institutional response to ethical problems often leads to ethics committees as window dressing, rubber stamping decisions not scrutinizing, and widespread regulatory capture. Its continuous, often uphill battle to ensure the patient's well-being, autonomy, and genuine informed consent truly remain core, not secondary to institutional pressures, corporate agendas, or a top-down population health view that can disregard the individual. #outro. What's really fascinating, I think, is how these historical patterns, the unethical experiments, the transfer of knowledge, even personnel from these deeply disturbing regimes, and this pervasive corporate influence, how they all combine. They reveal the systemic erosion of core medical ethics. It's not just, a few isolated bad actors. It's about how institutions themselves can be compromised, subtly, sometimes overtly, shifting from being guardians of health to, well, facilitators of profit or power.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The very principles designed to protect us, like the Nuremberg Code, they weren't just violated, they were actively circumvented, ignored by some of the very entities supposed to uphold them. And for some of the biggest crimes against humanity in medical history, the perpetrators literally walked free, continued their work, sometimes even ended up leading the very organizations meant to prevent such atrocities, creates this disturbing legacy that still casts a shadow today.
Yeah, and if we connect that to the bigger picture, it raises this important, urgent question for all of us, doesn't it? When profit motives or national security interests or institutional agendas get intertwined with medical practice, how do we as individuals make sure our autonomy, our welfare truly stay paramount?
That's the crucial question.
Understanding this hidden history, acknowledging its depth and reach, it's the first critical step, I believe, towards demanding transparency, ethical rigor, accountability in the present and for the future.
So what does this all mean for you, the informed learner? It's really a call to look beyond the headlines, to question the sources of our medical information, scrutinize the systems delivering our healthcare, and advocate for a system where ethical integrity truly supersedes all other considerations. What stands out to you about how these historical patterns might still be at play today, subtly shaping our medical landscape? Something powerful to mull over until our next deep dive.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.